Hi everybody, this is Granddad or Dad or Mark, and hello to Emily, Riley, Millie, Rawl, Hazel, George, Bridger, Lincoln, Merritt, April, Colin, Luke, Owen, Tessa, Corey, Katie, Hannah, Gabriel, Joshua, Miriam, Alan, Josie, Merritt, Harper, Faye, Irene, Ben, May, Ike, Ida, Artie, Peter, and Diane, Adam, and Christy, Soraya, and Elena. And happy birthday tomorrow to Emily, and day after tomorrow to your mother. We have the occasion of having the opportunity of a vehicle where we can have an old friend come and see us. So, look who's here.
Hi everybody! You guys know who I am, right? And you're saying, why is it Harry and not George? It's usually George that talks to us first. Well, I have a story to tell you that's well, kind of sad, but maybe George will come and talk to you a little bit when I'm finished telling the story. So how is everybody doing? It's fall time now and there should be leaves changing and all kinds of things. And I have to tell you about an adventure that George had. I didn't get to go on the adventure because I had a tummy ache. But George got to go on the adventure, but that's kind of why he's got a problem now. So I'm going to tell you about the adventure, and then maybe at the end, George will talk to you a little bit.
Harry, I'm kind of worried. Is George okay?
Yeah, he's all right, but well, he's very embarrassed. And so he wants me to do all the talking. And I don't mind because I usually don't get to talk nearly as much as he does anyway.
Well, all right. But we're very anxious to know what's going on with him. So get to your story so we can find out.
All right. So here's what happened. You see, George has a friend, and you remember, in fact, I used to tell a story about Clyde and how Clyde was the king over the land after George, you know. Well, Clyde was just the day before he was going to quit being king. Someone came to him and told him about this evil sorcerer. Oh, you probably remember Pushka Piak, don't you?
Well, of course we remember Pushka Piak.
Oh no. What happened? Well, Pushka Piak had been killing people's rabbits because he was feeding them to baby dragons to make them grow up. And so he would just go steal people's rabbits and kill them and feed them. And that's nothing compared to some of the things he's done. But anyway, Clyde took Pushka Piak and stuck him in prison. Oh no. He knows about Pushka Piak, doesn't he? Well, he does now. So Pushka Piak was really, really angry and he broke out of prison the next day. And he came to Clyde while Clyde was sleeping in his bed. And he picked him up and he put him inside of this stone wall, a stone room that didn't have any windows or doors. It just had one little hole the size of, about the size of of one of your quarters. A little bit smaller than my nose is right now. Well, yeah, about half that size. And that's all he had to breathe through, but that's all he had. There's no food and no water. Oh no. Well, what happened? Well, you know Gunk. Of course, he's been learning all kinds of things, and you know what he did? He transformed himself into an ant and worked in an ant colony for like 2 years. And he would carry things, and he got strong just like an ant. And he learned all about them. He learned their language and everything. So, at the end of the 2 years, he turned himself back into Gunk again, and he told us all about what he was doing. Well, when George heard about Clyde, George knew that Clyde needed something to eat. And so, well, first of all, he had Gunk try to open up the prison that Pushka Piak put George in, but Gunk couldn't do it. And so George had an idea, and he asked for Gunk to talk to his friends, the ants, and see if they would help us. Well, and they agreed to, and so each of the ants would carry 1 grain of wheat on their back to Clyde. And they'd crawl through the hole that he could breathe through, and so that he ate some wheat. And then George got a chocolate bar from your world, and he broke it into tiny pieces and had the ants carry that. But the trouble was that Clyde was thirsty, and ants don't have a good way of carrying water. So George asked he asked Gunk to make him small, so that George, and George had a big cup, and he had Gunk make that small too. And the way that he had him make it small, the way that Gunk made him small, was Gunk found an acorn out in the woods underneath an oak tree, and it had special powers. And all that George had to do was lick that acorn, and it turned him small. And then the cup that was in his hand turned small too. So then he got some water and put it in the cup, and it was about as much as a thimble. And he took that into Clyde, and Clyde drank the thimble of water. Well, it was a cup, but it was as small as a thimble. He took that cup and he drank it, but he was thirsty. And so George had to run really fast and went to the water, filled up the little cup, ran into the hole, gave it to Clyde. Clyde drank it, ran out, and it took about 2 hours before Clyde finally got his thirst quenched. And then he was really hungry. Before, he wasn't all that hungry because he didn't have anything to wash it down with. But now that he was all watered up, he wanted some more to eat. So George started carrying as big a pieces of meat that he could carry to Clyde, and Clyde ate it. And he felt better and better. But George, well, he had to get really small. And then he squeezed through the tiny little opening, and it was really hard for him. But he got long pieces of meat and long spaghetti, and he cut pancakes into long strips so he could drag them through the hole. And after a while, Gunk had the idea of making a very long piece of spaghetti, and George pulled the spaghetti in through the hole, and Gunk made it really, really long, And George just kept pulling, and he'd pull and Clyde would eat it. And he'd pull it and Clyde would eat it, and he'd pull it and Clyde would eat it. And that spaghetti that George pulled in was about a mile of spaghetti. But Clyde was really hungry, you know. Remember, he was strong too, and he had to keep up his strength. And for people like us, it takes a lot to get us enough to eat so that we can be strong again. Well, after a while, Clyde got strong again. And he went to the hole that he'd been breathing through, and he stuck his finger in, just like the boy stuck his finger in the dike, you know, to keep the water out of Holland, you know. And he started working at that hole with his strong finger, and before long he made it so it was about the size of my nose. Here, Mark, put up your hand so people can tell how big my nose is. Well, there you go, Harry. Does that help? Well, does it look like you're picking my nose? Well, kind of, but what am I supposed to do? Well, I don't like you picking my nose. Well, I don't like picking your nose either. Gross. Well, anyway, so Clyde started working at that, and even though he was only using one finger, he had to use all his strength to make that hole bigger. And so George had to work hard to bring him food. And of course, George was hungry too, so the next thing now that the hole was bigger, it was big enough for a sausage. And so Gunk made a long sausage, 60 feet long. And that actually is pretty heavy, and George pulled it in. And he would take bites of it because, you know, he was little. It didn't take much to feed him. But Clyde ate the rest of the sausage, and that made him strong too. And so then pretty soon he was able to get his whole hand in the hole. Rub around his hand. And made the hole bigger and bigger. And so pretty soon it got to where he didn't even need George anymore, because he would just put his mouth right up to the hole, and Gunk and I could shove carrots and potatoes and radishes and corn and sausage and peanuts and Cracker Jacks. And you have Cracker Jacks in your world, Harry? Well, someone snuck some over one time, and we really like them, so we make our own now. Oh, well, good. I like Cracker Jacks too. Well, anyway, they would just put him right in his mouth, and he would eat them. Nom, 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 nom. And he got stronger and stronger, and pretty soon he was able to stick his whole head outside the hole, and then we could really feed him. But that actually created some trouble, because you remember Clyde, he has that big thick neck. When he got all strong again, his neck got all thick, and he got stuck in the hole. So for a while he had to make his head go back and forth and break away the pieces of rock with his head, and that hurt him. But he was okay. And he got stronger and stronger, and pretty soon, after a while, he got so strong he had his old strength back again. And he put his shoulder up against the hole and boom! Knocked against it. He had to knock against it 2,700 times. But his prison came down, and he had a sore shoulder for a little while. Well, George would have been hurt when that happened, because when Clyde broke the wall down, of course, a big chunk of rock fell right on George. But even though he was little, he was strong, of course, being George and everything. And so he threw the rock off of him, and he was okay. But now it comes to the sad part of the story. Because Pushka Piak was furious with Gunk, that Gunk made George small so George could feed Clyde, and Clyde could get strong and get away. And so Pushka Piak stole the acorn, and he took it and he threw it into the air. And we don't know where the acorn went. We didn't know, and we looked and we looked and we looked, and George, well, I could fit him in my pocket, you know, but he was really sad because he didn't like being small. I mean, for one thing, Kyla didn't like him being small, and not only that, he tickled her ear when he talked to her because he'd get right up next to her ear because he couldn't talk loud because he was so tiny. And it tickled her ear, and she started laughing, and they couldn't have a good conversation. And no one takes someone that small seriously. They just don't think of it as George anymore, and George is really embarrassed. But that acorn, Gunk, he did some study about it, and he said that he thinks that acorn is going to land somewhere close to one of the people that love George. And so, I've been looking for acorns, but there's no oak trees here that are shedding their acorns now. And so, Mark, I want you to look for the acorn. Well, we don't have any oak trees here at all. I haven't seen one oak tree. Well, do any of you have oak trees around with some acorns? If you find an acorn, it might be the one that George can lick and get back to his normal size again. Well, Harry, how are they going to know? Well, Gunk told me that the acorn would be attracted to somebody that loved George. So if any of you find an acorn, there's a good chance that if you send it to me, it will be the one that will make George big again, his normal size. Well, Harry, okay. So, look, all you kids out there, we need your help. Find an acorn, and it won't do you any good to lick it. It only works for George. Gunk enchanted it. How do you know he enchanted it? Harry, you told me before we started filming you. Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, right. So, Gunk enchanted it so that it only worked on George. And if you lick it too much, it might take away some of its power anyway, so don't lick the acorn. That was for George to lick, and only George, I think. But Harry, do you think it's all right if we show George to him? Well, like I said, he's going to be awful embarrassed. He is here, isn't he? Yes, he's here. If you turn the pumpkin around, there'll be George right there. All right, we're gonna do that, George. Get ready. Is he showing up all right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so embarrassed! I'm so embarrassed! I can't even talk in my normal voice. And when I talk to Kyla, my voice is so high it drives her nuts, and it tickles her ear. Oh, I've got a little bit of a cough. Oh, kids, I'm so embarrassed. This is George, and usually I have a nice deep voice, and now I have this high little voice. And I've got to get big again so that I can have my normal voice back again. Please look for the acorn for me. You kids, I love you all. I love you all, Millie Roll, Hazel, George, Bridger, Lincoln, Colin, Luke, Owen, Tessa, Hannah Gabriel Joshua, Josie Merritt Harper and Faye, May Ike, Ida, and Artie. I love all you kids. And I love Emily and Riley, Merritt and April, Corey and Katie, Miriam and Alan, Irene and Ben, Peter and Diane, Adam and Christy, Soraya and Elena. I love you all. Please help me get big again so I can talk like I'm supposed to. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. This is pretty pitiful. Poor George. I carved the smile on the pumpkin so he could come to it and be smiling, but he doesn't sound like his heart is smiling very much, does he? George, it's going to be all right. I'm sure one of the kids is going to find the acorn.
What are they going to do with it?
Boy, good question.
Maybe they can mail it to us.
Yeah, you know, George, if they could mail the acorn to us, then could you lick it in pumpkin form?
Well, I think so. I'm looking forward to it. Let's try.
Okay, we'll give it a try. And all my love to everybody, and happy birthday to Emily.
Happy birthday, Emily. Yes, Emily, happy birthday. You're the first one to get to know me. Have a wonderful birthday from George and Harry. Happy birthday to all of you whose birthdays I haven't wished happy birthday on. Goodbye, and I love you.